Hi, and welcome to Chain Reactions, a weekly live stream from Myosin XYZ, the leading global marketing network, and hosted by yours truly, Blake, and my co-host, Polina. Tune in each week as we jam on the latest happenings in the wild and wonderful world of Web3. We're live on Unlonely.app every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, and release the pod every following week on Tuesdays. Now, let's talk Chain Reactions.
All right. Listen, let's get into it. So, welcome everyone. This is Chain Reactions. It's our weekly time, live stream and podcast where we talk to leaders, founders, and heads of marketing from across the industry on some of the best and most interesting projects, blockchains, and so on and so forth. Really excited about today. We got Mikyö from Ritual. They're doing some really incredible stuff. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation as we talk about AI, blockchain, and so much more, because I think, as you guys may or may not have heard, this AI thing is it's coming. And so I think this is going to be a really, really insightful conversation. So with that being said, Mikyö, I'm going to throw it over to you and say, how you doing? And can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Really glad to be on with you all. Thanks so much. So yeah, I can intro. I grew up, my father was a jazz musician, and so I'll start there. Sound is kind of a thread that will run through some of our conversation today, including with Ritual and some of the primitives there. So I grew up like in the midst of many genres and cultures and traveled a lot. He also brought me Apple computer at a very young age, before it was cool, pre OS 10. We were like in the Apple world. Yeah. And I started like creating and playing, quite young. I remember having a Bondi blue iMac and then getting like an iMac DV with iMovie and starting to like mess with, storytelling, but always focused at the level of sound. I ended up becoming a kind of micro-documentary filmmaker and was always in that, what we call the radio cut, right? So you're like cutting the verbal narrative first before you bring the visual story to life. So that was a big part of my background as that led me to be a marketer. And then I also grew up poor. And I think that was a part of the draw. Like 2008 financial crisis hit my family hard. So there was this kind of like instinctive, adaptive interest in economics and like how this system works. And so kind of like in the same, place that Bitcoin was forged, I was kind of forged as a young adult, right? And so all of those things led me. I spent most of my early 20s in the San Francisco Bay Area, kind of like early iPhone and mobile era, was immersed in Silicon Valley. There was like a ton of this kind of rapid prototyping and innovation culture. I was, influenced by like Tom Chi and this crew in some mansions in San Francisco. We would do these like prototyping sprints, right? So I kind of like imbibed this innovation culture in this very raw way. Took that into Web 2, had some leadership roles there. And then I think in like 2020, one of my close friends who's a fellow filmmaker created the ICO film for Filecoin. And he was deep with the Protocol Labs crew. And so he kind of wove me in. We actually did a micro-documentary series that was called the Web3 Showcase just before COVID. And that was before like Web3 was really a meme or a term. And that really opened my eyes to like the deeper potentials of the space and really what this whole movement is about. So from 2020, I kind of got pilled, went down deep in the rabbit hole, and then transitioned into the space. And I kind of, from there, I became really obsessed with like privacy primitives. I got deep in privacy. That was the first kind of infrastructure layer. And then
was it because you're starting to use DeFi and you realize if you send anyone one transaction, they can look at your wallet and see everything you've ever done?
This is definitely a key piece, right? And then also this like the ethos of privacy really, like the kind of cypherpunk stuff really spoke to me.
Right.
I felt like from a values perspective, and then, from there, I worked most of last year with Eigenlayer. That was another deep kind of infra. And I really like to come back to this. I was like, there are certain tonalities in different pieces of infrastructure, right? You can kind of sense them. And I really feel that with Eigenlayer, and I really feel it with Ritual as well. So, that's a little bit of my story. Yeah.
What's Ritual then in 60 seconds?
For
if you
sure.
can
distill it down.
And how specifically did you find yourself, from privacy to actually AI and blockchain, right? And then
yeah, for sure. Well, maybe I'll take the second one first. So I feel like my journey was also really influenced by like the future of work conversation and like culture. And I think I was always seeking like a frontier, both in terms of like ways of working, like collaborative environments and human systems and how people work together, but also in terms of like what's emerging at the bleeding edge, right?
Right.
And so I think that's what drew me to crypto AI for sure, is like wanting to be at that, very tip of what's emerging. And so, that brings us to Ritual. So in 60 seconds, okay, so first let's start with like, what are blockchains? Very, very homogenous, right? Very like, again, if we had to make a sound, like what is the sound of Bitcoin, right? It's like a single tone.
Cling.
Yeah, exactly. Cling. No, cling.
Yeah.
Like transaction.
Right.
No. What's the sound of Ethereum? Yeah.
Tick, 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 or slower actually, because it's not that fast. So tick, tick, tick.
Right? A little bit more dimensional than Bitcoin. Maybe like a single chord. No? Wing. Yeah, something, right?
I like that.
Yeah. But still quite simple. It's not a chord progression, Ritual is like an orchestra. It's like a symphony, right? There's this like hyper dynamic, multi-instrumental composition, right? That includes like hardware, different paradigms of compute. They all kind of come together, right? And in the simplest way, it's a new genre of decentralized network, right? And developers can access diverse forms of compute within the EVM. That's really the key.
I think there's a lot of talk about like what crypto AI is today, like, what are the capabilities and things like that. So what is wrong with crypto AI landscape today, and how Ritual, wants to evolve it sort of, or provide an infrastructure to grow it? Like, where is it in the crypto AI world?
Yeah. Most of crypto AI today it's kind of in the name, right? We have this like crypto X AI is the meme, right? And the X
And now
is really
it's DeFi, but with the A, right?
right. Deep AI. I don't know how we pronounce it.
AI. I don't know. It makes no sense.
The X in between the two is the most important part of it, right? And for most projects, that means that it's off-chain AI. It's kind of Frankenstein together. It's a bolt-on, right? In the worst case scenario, that means that, people are just riding the hype cycle, basically, right? Like if you look at agents, obviously there's been a lot of critique of agents recently. And it's, it's a very thin layer, right? There's not a lot substantial in the current agent frameworks. As a whole, the space suffers from that. And it really suffers because there's different levels. There's like the bolt-on Frankenstein nature. We can definitely talk about verifiability. This is another piece, right? This means like we live in a world of deep fakes, right? We live in a world of scammers, right? We live in a world of like replication, right? Verifiability means like, this is the core value proposition of blockchains themselves. But when we bring AI into the picture, then we're looking at, okay, which model did you use? What was it trained on? How do we prove that like any set of computation was actually run using a given model or using a given hardware or using a given framework, right? This is also a significant issue with existing crypto AI, right? So solving
because nobody's doing this well right now is what you're saying.
There are projects that are approaching this in different ways. I'm not going to say no one's doing it, but I'm saying verifiability is a core issue that Ritual definitely solves for in a more holistic way, right? I mean, we could also talk about like provenance and governance with models, right? We could look at like, okay, how do you do model attribution? How do you do like ownership? You know, what data was the model trained on? And also things like, you know, we had this with NFTs where like the owner gets a kickback every time the thing sells. You know, there's a lot of different projects that are talking about that in relationship to models. How do we attribute back to the original model creator? What does the incentive layer look like, right? So there's like many ways that we can kind of problematize the existing stack, kind of all of which Ritual has answers for in different ways. Yeah, please.
So this is great, right? So what I'm sensing is that there's a lot here. So I'm going to try and distill it down and make it simpler for especially people listening, right? Who may not really understand any of this. They'll be like, what the hell is verifiability? What is provenance? So maybe I think a really good way to think about this is, you know, so number one, would you describe it, you know, there's Ritual Network. And so there's a lot of different solutions within that. Would you describe it as, I guess I'm trying to figure out the right way to frame it, which, sorry, I've been having I'm a little sick right now. So I'm good. Working my way through this.
At the core level, there's one key distinction, which is Ritual has what we call enshrined models on chain.
Okay.
What does that actually mean?
So tell me more.
Yeah. So if the blockchain is the core substrate that we're working within, right? What that means is that models are objects on chain on Ritual. That is incredibly unique. It's really hard to do. There's a lot of problems that emerge, like hard problems, like PhD level problems that emerge in order to do that, right? Basically, every other project is running models in some kind of off-chain, sidecar, co-processor kind of way that they're not actually living within the blockchain substrate. And that has all these second and third order effects around verifiability, around provenance and governance, the other things that I mentioned earlier, right? But at a very simple level, we're saying the models are actually on chain. And that's the really key difference.
So how does that work? If you're a dev and you're coming in and you're saying, I want to build, what kind of, I guess the question is like, how does one engage with Ritual versus like, if I want to launch some agent project, right? Do I build it entirely on Ritual or do I build it somewhere else? And then I kind of leverage Ritual tech, right?
Exactly.
Do you know what I'm getting at?
For sure. Yeah. So at the highest level, that is also the beauty of the project is that we have all these other computational paradigms. It's not just AI actually, and this is where we can go even further, right? Things like zero knowledge or like trusted execution environments. There are all these other computational paradigms that are brought natively into an EVM environment. So what that means is you have, I don't know, tens of thousands of developers around the world that are familiar with Ethereum. they can use the languages they already know, and they can call on and remix and kind of compose or orchestrate these other computational paradigms within Ritual, which is like, we call it EVM++, but it's basically like an extension of an EVM environment, right? So from a developer experience perspective, it's kind of familiar, right? But then what you can call in, what you can kind of like the tools, the primitives, the kind of the potions that you can mix as a alchemist on Ritual, right?
Let's go.
Can draw on AI and all of these other expressive compute paradigms.
Okay. So
Makes
the
it
core
magic.
difference is it being completely on chain. That's we settled. The experience for developers is very familiar, sort of a good experience to build products completely on chain at the intersection of crypto and AI. What is it for, users? Like from user perspective, like myself, Blake, I don't know, you, just generally a consumer, how would, like, what kind of dApps or
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So, well, to your question earlier, Blake, about agents, right? The agent layer today, we talk about like swap bots on Twitter, right? Just like reply guys and that layer. So
my biggest frustration with agents right now, it's all just, that's it. Like,
the same
there's all this hype. Where are the good agents at? I don't understand.
Where's the innovation?
Exactly. So again, bringing them onto this blockchain substrate means that you can do like on-chain actions using agents. So like smart agents, let's call them, right? But they live ontologically on chain, and then they can leverage a bunch of the other primitives that Ritual has. Like one that we talk about a lot is scheduled transactions, right? So you could have an agent that kind of wakes up every 24 hours, runs an AI model against like DeFi data, and then automatically adjusts your portfolio allocation according to some set of parameters that you've established, right? That's a very simple example of an end user experience that you can't create anywhere else today.
Okay.
Interesting.
That makes sense. So then you can build like an app, an experience where a user can simply set up an agent like this and basically automate his trading.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
And
there's many others. I could give you a laundry list. It's very complex, actually. There's like a lot of things that are possible, but that's like a very tangible example. Yeah.
Yeah. I want to dig deeper a bit into marketing because, as you said yourself, like it is very complex. And I imagine, like, looking at Ritual Twitter now and everything, like the Ritual Foundation Twitter is basically new, let's say. There's not much going on. So I imagine that you're gearing up to something. And I'm wondering, given the complexity of the product in general, are you like the main goal right now is to speak to developers as a primary audience, I would imagine, and subsequently just like retail users to get the hype, get people talking about the Ritual? What is the plan?
yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, we think about a few different classes, right? Yeah, developers and builders are obviously core to any protocol, especially infrastructure or layer one. We also think about like enthusiasts, right? People that care about and are interested in this intersection, right? And it's a unique class of person, yeah? There's definitely a right curve thing going on here, as you can tell. But, this takes like understanding to some degree both of these paradigms, like understanding enough about how AI works and understanding enough about how crypto works to then meaningfully come into this conversation and understand like what this niche actually means and what's possible here.
So we're taking one niche and then the other niche, and then we're putting them together to create an even smaller niche.
Yo, I'm gonna take a niche and put it on another niche. We're gonna
They say niche down, you know, if you want
to. Exactly. And so that is also an opportunity for us to be kind of like a mentor brand, right? You know, like the Gandalf archetype, right? Like, how can we be the guide for these enthusiasts and for these builders to help them shape this future? Because really it is like what they bring to life using our infrastructure. That's what actually matters the most, right? So how can we empower them? How can we educate them? And how can we grow that like sub niche, as you're saying, even further, right?
Yeah.
That's a key
I have
part.
an idea.
Yeah, please.
So I think I'm actually that person because I'll tell you, in my spare time when I'm not working on Myosin, I've been someone who has, you know, prior to Myosin, what I do here, you know, as a co-founder at Myosin here today, it was a lot of like launching early stage companies, products, whatever. However, I've never really been a dev. You know, I have very basic proficiency in the main languages, but I would not consider myself a developer at all. But obviously with the rise of vibe coding, right? Replit agent, you know, Windsurf, Cursor, there's a whole new generation of people like myself who, you know, I wouldn't go and say I could go build something that would rival, you know, what a full stack engineer could build, but I can start to bring these prototypes to life a lot quicker than anyone else.
Yep.
Or than previously before, right? And so actually your idea before, something I've actually been experimenting with in my spare time and using Replit Agent V2 is a crypto hedge fund, which is this concept of, you know, you have 6 different agents. One is like a Warren Buffett, Bill Ackman, you know, all these different trading, like a sentiment analysis agent. They all run through a risk agent, which then goes to the portfolio manager. That's something really interesting that I think but here's the thing, I saw it on Twitter, it was just for TradFi, right? And I was like, why don't we have this for crypto Twitter? Like there should be something that can manage my portfolio positions across Base, Solana, you know, whatever else I want to trade it on. So I guess it's less a question and more maybe of an insight or a suggestion that I think there's a lot of other folks like myself as well who would love some guidance, right? And say, you know, where's the best place to do this? Where, you know, so maybe it's something around you guys creating MCPs, right? Where people can just plug straight into Ritual without, you know, wherever they're building it. But curious if that's been something that you guys have been thinking about or planning on expanding. I'm not sure.
Yeah, we're doing some MCP stuff. I won't speak I won't speak in depth on that yet, but yeah, exactly. There's a little bit of alpha there for you, for sure.
But a question also for you, Blake, in your, you know, vibe coding journey so far with this crypto, at the intersection of crypto and AI, have you been experiencing these roadblocks where you would, you know, question if there is a better solution, like a need for, you know, a better infrastructure like Ritual, and what are these roadblocks, or not that much?
I don't think I'm quite at that point yet. So that's also an interesting thing in the user journey.
Exactly.
Guidance.
Exactly.
You know, a lot of things I think Mikyö is hitting on are definitely, you know, someone who's a lot more proficient, who's a lot deeper in the space. But I'm sure if I were to really go deep and start to get there, I'm going to inevitably hit those problems, right? So I think it's kind of more educating it and putting that out so that the novices of the world can kind of see that insight. You know, having a Gandalf in your corner is always, I would love to have someone guide me, basically. Like, I feel like, especially with an AI and crypto, there is no real I haven't seen any really credible sources to like walk me through this journey and explain it to people like myself.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There. Yeah,
we've been talking about some things like this too. Exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I know you guys have been building in stealth for like a few years now, right? And now you decided to come out of the shadows, or at least it looks like you have. What made like, why is that? What's happening?
For sure. Yeah. So like I said, there were some really hard problems to solve in creating a network like this. We didn't talk so much about hardware, but for example, like Ethereum, it's like relatively simple hardware requirements. Everyone's running the Ethereum consensus software. It's pretty straightforward, right? To participate in that as a network. On Ritual, we actually have kind of like node specialization. So there's different types of computers on the Ritual blockchain, some of which are actually GPUs, right? Like A100s. Like this is like radically different than any other chain. Even networks like BitTensor, where they're doing GPU stuff, yeah. But the GPUs are not actually on the network, right? There's a blockchain network that coordinates them, but the GPUs, again, are not living on the substrate, right? And so within Ritual, that like building a blockchain that actually has different hardware required innovation across all three levels, like across consensus, incentive design, and execution. And so that work kind of put us into stealth mode, right? With the PhDs, right? Building all of that, testing it, getting it like actually functionally ready. And now we're at the place where we can say, okay, we have, built this, it works. Here's all the possibilities it unlocks. And now we're ready to kind of bring that into the world and guide people through this journey, right?
Yeah. So I imagine you're working with a lot of super smart PhD level people who made this all possible. And, as a marketer, when you are in all of this like technical, obviously like it can be a superior infrastructure, so much tech and everything, but you need to be able to translate it into a message that resonates and at the same time attracts also the same level of like PhD builders.
Yeah.
How do you manage that?
Yeah, for sure.
Easy question.
Exactly. This is definitely my work day to day. And I think there are some great examples. One that I usually reference internally with the team is Nillian, who I think you guys have had on this podcast, actually.
Yeah, Charlie on. That was a really fun one.
Yeah, I think they did a great job with blind compute, for example.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of like translating this very complex core infrastructural technology into a simple metaphor that people can relate to.
Yeah.
Right now, we've been to date, we've been talking about Ritual as the most expressive blockchain, which attempts to kind of encapsulate some of what I was sharing, right? In terms of like any compute, any hardware, right? This kind of infinite blockchain substrate. We have some other memes that will be coming forward in the coming months. But yeah, a lot of it is around taking highly, highly complex infrastructure, making it simple and accessible and relatable, and then creating that as a kind of community experience that people can step into and share,
Do you think that sometimes... Yeah. But do you think that sometimes there is a blocker? Because, I don't know about you, but in my sort of experience working with very smart, very technical people who really are passionate about what they're building, when you try to dumb down the messaging kind of so that it resonates better or try to speak about it in a different way, you're always like hitting the wall almost. But we're not just this, we're that also. And we do that too.
Dilemma.
Exactly.
Do you also have the same problem?
For sure. It's front and center for us. Even kind of claiming the layer, like an AI layer 1, which other projects are talking about, right? That doesn't fully do justice to what Ritual is. It's actually way, way beyond that. And, I'm in my own journey of coming to understand those frontiers and like the actual possibility space. right?
Yeah.
We talk a lot about heterogeneous compute. This is a very challenging word for people to like, what does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
Yeah,
That's my first question.
Yeah, what does that mean? Well, what it means is kind of what I was talking about in terms of the hardware, right? It means that, like I said about Ethereum, highly homogeneous, right? The same computers doing the same things every day. The note that you made, that little note we made, right? It's simple, right? Heterogeneous speaks to a diversity of computational paradigms, including AI, including ZK, including TEEs, like on a blockchain, right?
Whoa.
And the frontiers in the design space that opens up is totally radical. And yeah, but you know, at the same time, we have to lead the crypto AI conversation. We have to center it there. We have to dumb it down and simplify, right? And so yes, this tension, we live this tension every day for sure.
So like, how do you navigate this? Is it like, you know, you're centering different channels around different messages, or like, do you break it down by, you know, the audience that you're trying to attract? Because a lot of the times it's like a lose battle if you're trying to just pursue like what you need. So you kind of have to work with the whole team as well. So how do you navigate that, especially, you know, with coming out of stealth?
Yeah. I mean, we're really lucky because we do have an incredible team, right? That's definitely one of the things that drew me to the project. And within that, we have these different niches, as you're speaking to, our different personas, right? And some of that is like, there was a conversation actually at ETH Denver about this and about like Web2 AI and how do you like, you know, bring in developers from that world and attract them into crypto. And I think this is one vector, right? Is kind of like AI researchers and speaking to that crowd, right? The very right curve, highly technical audiences. That's one thing. The other thing is more like this, you know, creating simple metaphors, making it accessible, guiding people on the journey, right? And I think we have to do both, and they have to be in concert so that people can kind of like go one click deeper, right? If they are interested, if they want to build something, or if they just want to learn and write and research, like how do we also give them a pathway within the community and give them the resources that they need? So a lot of it ends up being kind of like user experience, if you will, right? But that centers around education because it is so complex. So yeah.
This is where I'm just thinking out loud. I'm just like giving my perspectives as a non-super technical guy, right? I think there, and from a marketer's point of view, I think there is definitely, as you kind of just started to describe like more and more, and I'm starting to learn more and more, it does start to make more sense. Like what was it, infinite blockchain, or
I won't fully claim that, but yeah, I might have said
it. Yeah, something along those lines. There's something there. I think there's like a rich creative territory. Much in, I'm thinking like, what is Ritual's version of, you know, blind compute, right?
Yeah,
it's infinite blockchain. There's something there. I'm just thinking out loud.
Expressive blockchain.
Yeah, expressive is where we've centered, and
expressive.
Yeah, and like what that means is the kinds of user experiences, the kinds of actions, like the kinds of things you can do on blockchains today have been super limited, right?
Yeah.
Like
based
DeFi
on the smart contracts. And,
yeah, exactly. Like it's like a very small set of things, and our goal is really to like actually expand that, right? That's why I'm saying like it's a new genre of decentralized network, because it's like we have to cross the chasm as an industry, right? We can't just be like, okay, cool, we did DeFi, like that's kind of it. We have to like actually cross over. And yeah, some of that is consumer. It's truly like end user experiences that ordinary people want to use, but there are plenty of other layers in between as well, right? Like we talked about DeFi earlier, we talked about smart agents. There's a lot of examples of things that are going to be like appealing to a much wider group of people than, Uniswap has been over the last 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the goal.
Like for the most part, I would say it's, what you asked you from the beginning of the podcast, where you shared like an example of what an agent on Ritual like can do on chain that currently they don't. So putting together like the ideas of what can be built and really making it very like, on different levels of technical awareness of what can be possible.
Exactly.
Where, for Twitter or something, like for people like me, it would be like, okay, I understand this.
Totally.
And then you can go deeper if you want to build something like this. So if someone would want to build something on Ritual, right, and would want to get help or whatever, would there be like, are you looking at, running this sort of maybe like, like Safari does a badge for marketers to educate them about like Web3 marketing and stuff? Would there be something similar, or is it more like hackathon ways?
Yeah.
How are you thinking about the developer education?
Yeah, for sure. We are thinking about, to your point earlier, Blake, about like kind of cohort based, looking at really being hands-on, giving people access to founders, doing a high touch experience. And yeah, there will be a builder program around private and public testnet, which are on the horizon. And then, yeah, we're also thinking about this broader education for enthusiasts and people like us, right? Who are not technical, who are not oriented. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, both of those personas or audiences are super important to us. And we're wanting to create higher touch experiences across both.
That's good to hear. I'm excited to see some of that, because I mean, it's just too much to handle on Twitter feed if it's too technical, I feel like. And if you want to get the message across, I think the same thing was for Nilian, right? I mean, they came out of stealth mode and like very deep educational phase not so long ago, and seem to have worked quite well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Kevin Kelly talks about 1,000 true fans, right? It's like we're still in the process of building those first 1,000 true fans.
Have you seen any interesting commonalities through those first like the existing community today? Like I'm curious about, like, if we zoom out for a second and we talk about the future of AI and blockchain and expressibility. What's the term we're using? Expressive blockchain.
Expressive compute, yeah.
Expressive compute, right? By the way, I'm just saying there's something about infinite expressibility. Infinite.
That's good.
There's something there.
For sure.
I just see the visual of, right? Like it unlocks something. It unlocks an emotion, at least just for me.
Exactly.
But yeah, like what kind of stuff do you see people trying to build? Or what do you think people are most interested in? Where do you think we're headed, I guess, in the coming months and years? Because obviously it's a very interesting time in the crypto markets, in the world of blockchain, in the world of AI. Things are developing at a rapid pace that we can't even begin to fathom. Curious what you're hearing, from the people on the ground.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think people are interested in different layers. Like I mentioned, there is the kind of like truly consumer use cases, or even something like games, and like building AI models and ML and large language models both into games. There's people that are more concerned with kind of infrastructure and like middleware, like upgrading existing protocols using AI. I think long term, like at the highest level, the promises of blockchain as a whole, we talk about verifiability, unstoppability. That's a meme, hat tip to Nima from Eigenlayer for that. Like, I think that ultimately this is about how humans and computers interact, right? And the promise of blockchain is about rebuilding the trust between humans and computers, in a world of deep fakes, in a world of like infinite scamability, we're trying to say, okay, this is true. Like this computation was run in this way. You know, they're like protocolized, you know, decentralized in the true sense that somebody can't, you know, censor you or turn you off because they don't like you, right? And then when that combines with AI, what that means is that like we can have applications where that we know are running exactly how we say. We can have developer property rights, right? There was all this conversation in like 2018 about rebuilding a decentralized Uber. It's still a good example, right? You're like, okay, the take rate's 10%, it's fixed. No one can change that, right? And that gives this idea of like developer property where it's not, you know, you're not just going to get rug pulled on the Twitter API because Elon took over, right? Developers can be assured that the substrate they're building on has certain guarantees and affordances and is not going to change, right? And that fundamentally rebuilds the relationship that we have with our devices, right? The relationship that we have with this whole apparatus that we know is harvesting our attention, right? We don't like where things have gone in Web 2. That's why we're building in this space in the first place. And then to combine that with AI, that unlocks this whole infinite frontier to your point earlier, right?
Let's go. Interesting. No, that makes a lot of sense because I think it's, as we talked about earlier, right? How do we grow that pie?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we lose sight of, you know, people were talking about decentralized Uber for quite a long time, and I feel, you know, we kind of lost sight of that with all these meme coins and, you know, Trump coin and coins and agents and AIXBT and all these things.
For sure.
But when you zoom out and you kind of take a step back, you start to remember like, hey, like this is what I think a lot of us were really excited about when we first started, you know, back in the day. So very exciting.
You know, this all sounds like the whole trust rebuilding thing all sounds like a docu-series for me. So maybe some of your, you know, previous works can be put into this to raise awareness. And, you know, video is hidden right now on X. So
totally.
Mikyö, I know, I believe you have a hard stop, so I want to make sure we have enough time for
the
rapid fire questions.
Okay, cool.
Which are always quite fun. So I think with that, we should probably jump straight into those.
Cool.
So I'll let Polina kick it off. Yeah.
Okay. So the first one is the most underrated marketing tactic in Web3 right now, or generally, in your opinion.
Actually care about people in your community and lift them up. Like genuinely like serve the people that are investing in your project and really like at an individual level, you know?
Yeah.
That high touch service is that secret sauce. Yeah.
Exactly.
It's always just the most passionate people who really stick to it. Others just talk, really. Okay. Second one, the worst advice that maybe you've received, like, you know, for ritual or generally that's going around in crypto.
Yeah, I think as a space, we do have a problem of like just building tech that maybe people don't even want, or thinking from a marketing standpoint, thinking like the tech speaks for itself, right? Yeah. Like this, I think this gets to this like simple metaphors conversation that we've been having, right? I think that the tech doesn't speak for itself. We have to speak for it. We have to craft stories, and to your point about infinite, we have to create an emotional experience that people can tap into and aspire to and care about, that is personally meaningful for them, right? So
it's exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
And by the way, I think just a quick note on that, right? Like it's something we've talked about because we give these like 1 hour like go to market presentations for like ecosystems and VCs a lot. And I think something that my co-founder Simon, we always hit on is like, this isn't a new problem. This isn't a Web3 only problem.
Exactly.
It's like Peter Thiel in his book, like 0 to 1, he also talked about it, and he wrote that like 10 years ago now. I don't even remember. Mm-hmm. But like in 0 to 1, he's like, no, the product, same thing. Product does not speak for itself, and so it's this eternal, weird kind of like hubris maybe, but unintentional that like builders have of just like, yeah, I'm going to build it and everyone's going to want it, right? Like,
exactly.
It's that easy.
If you build it, they will come. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. They don't. No. Yes.
They just realize it too late usually, but oh well. The next one is which brand in crypto right now do you think is crushing it? Or multiple?
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about Nillion earlier. I think they're doing a great job of bridging that gap. The brands that Myosin's working with, those are the ones that are crushing.
Not sponsored.
Let's go.
Exactly.
Got some good folks in there.
Thank you. Okay, and the last one is looking back. What's your biggest learning as a Web3 marketer?
This is my favorite one. We've asked every guest in the 3 years we've done this.
That's it. Yeah. I think for me, this is actually about culture. One of my mentors used to say, your culture is your brand. I really like that. And I think there's conversations happening in the DAO space, but we don't focus enough on the human systems and how we are actually coordinating and collaborating together, how we speak to each other, how we work together every day. Like, I think my biggest learning is that sets the tone for everything, and that becomes your brand expression, right? So really focusing on your team, how you're working, right? The culture internally. I
love that one. And I just want to +1 on that, because especially as, we are a DAO, right? And so like I've been thinking about this for 3 years. Yeah. Polina's obviously a great contributor. She's a guild lead for us and works with us on a lot of things. But something that I think was frustrating for me a couple of years ago when we started this, and partly why we built it in the way that we did, was that I think when DAOs first started to like really hit the kind of like mainstream a couple of years ago, I think there are a lot of people that would just like, they'd launch it and they'd be like, here's our governance model and here's our white paper. And I'll be like, cool, but you guys know, like there's still people here, right? Like this isn't a program. Exactly. Like a DAO is, as you're talking about, it's still run by human beings. And when we forget and we abstract away that human side of things, it leads to a lot of problems. And I think that's why a lot of those DAOs that started a couple of years ago don't exist anymore. But the ones that are able to kind of, as you said, build a culture through the people and the brand, and that becomes your brand. And that's a lot more, that has staying power in a way, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it. Well, this is great. Mikyö, thank you so much for coming on. I really had a lot of fun, hearing a lot more about Ritual. I know there's a lot of exciting things coming up the pipe. I want to give you a second before we log off to obviously shill yourself, shill anything coming up. What can people expect to see in the coming months? What should people be looking for, and how can they find you? Let the world know.
Yeah. Join the community. There's a lot that's starting to happen in Discord. Definitely keep your ears open. There's a lot of stuff that's going to come to life over the next couple of months. And so, both for the enthusiasts, for the builders, for the researchers, if you're interested in this intersection of crypto AI and want to really, come and work on the frontier, like, we've got you. So,
let's do it. All right. Well, perfect. I think that's it then, Mikyö. So I think we're going to let you go, but thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for coming on.
Cheers. Thank you both. This is great. Yeah. See you soon.
See you online.
Thanks so much, team.
Cheers.
Ciao.